Good evening. Devolved issues have dominated the day's campaigning in the general election. While Brexit and a second independence referendum did feature, the parties chose mainly to talk about subjects which are the Scottish Parliament's responsibility, rather than Westminster's. Willie Johnston reports.
As well as this, somebody has...
A rapt audience for Labour's Kezia Dugdale at a book warehouse in Dunfermline. She accused the SNP of failing children like these, standards in reading, writing and numeracy all down in what she called a decade of division.
Well, what we've seen now is the gap between the richest and the poorest kids in Scotland remaining stubbornly wide. I want to change that. I want to close that gap. But for the first time in Scotland, the brightest kids, the most academically gifted kids are falling behind too. This should shame our nation. We gifted the world comprehensive state education, and under the SNP, standards are falling and class sizes are getting bigger, and that's all because the SNP are so obsessed with the Constitution and the second independence referendum.
Right now we've got a new national...
On the Andrew Marr programme, the First Minister came under pressure on education. She didn't deny the poor literacy and numeracy results, but insisted the issues were being addressed.
The fundamentals of Scottish education in many respects are very strong, and I repeat again, we now have record numbers of young people coming out of our schools with higher and advanced higher passes and going into what we call positive destinations. So I'm focused on improving these areas that we need to improve, but also making sure that we don't do a disservice to teachers and pupils across the country by saying everything about Scottish education is bad.
Nicola Sturgeon also said people in Scotland should have a choice over their future, with an independence referendum at the end of the Brexit process. And she said an SNP vote would strengthen her hand in opposing a damaging so-called hard Brexit and seeking to stay in the single market. Bread making in Kinross, the Liberal Democrat leader Willie Rennie claimed an SNP obsession with independence wasn't a recipe for good governance. He chose to highlight long waiting times for children needing essential mental health treatment. More than 600 days, he said, in some regions.
Well, it's really terrible that young children are having to wait up to 2 years to get the important mental health treatment that they need. And this is from an SNP government that said it was going to treat mental health as a priority, but they've been too distracted by independence to really focus on bringing the waiting times down.
The Conservatives found themselves defending accusations of a U-turn over free prescriptions, once described by them as a publicly funded bribe.
You know, there have been huge breakthroughs in pharmaceutical technology. There are a lot of new medicines. The widest possible access to them will keep people out of hospital. Secondly, by 2021 it'll be nearly 10 years since people did pay for prescriptions, and while we thought last year it was something you could argue to reintroduce, by then I think people will be used to it, and we actually recognise and have listened to people it's a policy they like.
The Greens are contesting only 3 seats at this election. Their co-convener told the BBC's Sunday Politics Scotland show it was principally down to a lack of money and resources after a sustained period of elections, and not to prop up the SNP. But
if there's a Tory-held seat, I think that's clearly one of the factors that people would have in mind. Anybody on the progressive side of politics needs to be trying to prevent the kind of Tory takeover at Westminster that Theresa May is planning for.
And so ends the first full week of the campaign. A new one, of course, starts tomorrow. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland.